Welcome to the Imperfectly Empowered podcast with leading DIY lifestyle blogger ahnafulmer, where women are inspired with authentic stories and practical strategies to reclaim their hearts and homes by empowering transformation, one imperfect day at a time.
Welcome to another episode of the Imperfectly Empowered podcast. I am your host, ahnafulmer. I am thrilled to be able to introduce to you today Ashley Hoover. Ashley is wife to Joe, mom of two, and house mom to a dozen teenage girls. 6 years ago, at the age of 29 years old, Ashley's life was turned upside down when she was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. What is typically a brief encounter with cancer has turned into 2 relapses, 1 stem cell transplant, failed treatments, and an ongoing clinical trial. With wit and raw honesty, Ashley writes about her journey at the website www.choosinghope.blog, where she inspires her readers to choose hope amidst trial. Friends, it is my privilege and honor to introduce to you a real-life superhero who also happens to be one of my best friends, Ashley Hoover. Oh, we are here with one of my best friends, Ashley Hoover. It is so fun to have you here. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah. Oh, and I told Ashley that I wanted to have her on the podcast. I said there's no promises how much or how little I will or won't cry.
I wore waterproof mascara today. So
well, you're smarter than I am. I do have tissues. I was prepared.
Yeah,
for that,
I've got mine back there too.
We met in 9th grade. We still talk about this. So we were introduced by one of our other best friends, Heather. And Heather and I met in 8th grade. And then she said, hey, by the way, I think one of my best friends from middle school is now going to go to your high school and you'll have to look out for her. Her name's Ashley. And it was social studies, I think, wasn't it? 9th grade.
Social studies.
Somehow we connected. I don't know who recognized who or how we even knew. Oh, that's
the
person. There she is. Yeah. It was our eyes locked in social studies in 9th grade.
The rest is history.
The rest is history. It is. Do you ever look back to those days and think, if you had told me, you know what I mean? Like fast forward, 15 years? I can't do that much math. And here we are. Can you imagine?
I'm glad.
It's just.
Well, in some ways, I'm glad no one told me a lot of the things, but I'm so glad thank God for growth and change and that I am not that person anymore,
Yeah.
So anyway. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about that, but
it's a hard year.
Man, it's hard for so many reasons, for fashion reasons, for emotional reasons.
Yes.
For so many reasons. So we went our separate ways in college. So we went through high school together. And then you went to Indiana. You went to Grace University, right?
College. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Grace College. And then I went to Cedarville in Ohio. And unlike myself, I only came out with 1 degree. You came out with 2. So you came out with a bachelor's and an MRS degree.
I most importantly got my MRS. Yeah.
You fulfilled the college dream.
I actually dropped out at Grace to get
I don't
my
think I
MRS.
remember that.
Yeah, no, I was a junior when I met Joe, and he was graduating from a different school, and it was like he was going on to medical school, and it was like, well, that's more important than me getting my bachelor's. So
I actually don't remember that.
Yeah, a little known fact. But then I did finish my degree after we moved to Iowa. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead.
And one of my favorite stories. So you guys share the same birthday, which is tomorrow, actually. Happy early birthday.
Thank you.
At least the day that we're recording this. Tell me a little bit about, you guys had kind of a unique experience. How did Joe know that you were the one? Tell us that story.
Yeah. So Anna knows because she knew me in high school. I was in a long relationship through high school and college, and I just was stubborn in not listening to what God really wanted for my life. And so it was the summer before my sophomore year of college, summer before my junior year, sorry. And I finally like broke it off. Like, I'm done. And I was like, okay, God, I'm fully like following you. I want what you want, no more dating, none of this. And so I go back to school, and I went early. I was an RA that year, and had to be there for RA training. And I just dove straight in, got myself involved at church, and I was going to be a middle school youth leader. And so the first Sunday I was back, the youth pastor, who was an old friend of my sister, so he knew me really well, and he and his wife introduced me to two of the other youth leaders that year, and they were Joe Hoover and Ben Hoover, his younger brother. And it was like, oh, he's cute, but like, I'm not dating, not interested, didn't even think a thing of it. And so then, like, I don't know, a week or so later, he friended me on Facebook, which at the time was brand new. If you remember, Facebook used to just be, you had to have like the .edu email address. And so he friended me on Facebook, and he wrote on my wall, "Hey, we're birthday buddies." And I was like, oh, that's cool. Like, I've never known anyone with my birthday. And so we just got to know each other. We served alongside each other.
Which is really quite the pickup line. Like,
right?
What?
I know.
It worked.
I didn't really think much of it. But from his lens, he had also been in a long relationship and had really been fed up with dating. And he was talking to a friend about it like a year or so before meeting me, and was like, listen, I'm just like, I'm done with this whole dating thing. And like, I just want to know like who it is that I'm going to spend my life with, if, I'm going to spend my life with someone. And his friend was like, well, my dad prayed this prayer that, he was in a similar place, and said, God, I'm not going to date anymore. If there's someone you want me to marry, I pray that she'll have the same middle name as me. And long story short, he meets this woman, they have the same middle name, 4 kids later, and like 30 some years of marriage, and like happily ever after. So my Joe says, okay. So he prays a year before he meets me or more. I'm not going to date until I meet someone that has the same birthday as me. And that's how I'll know that like, this is the woman for me. So I'm thinking, cool, like we have the same birthday. And he's thinking, oh my word, we're going to get married. So, and we did, less than a year. It was like, less than a year to the day when we met for the first time. So it was all very fast. But you remember the Christmas when we got engaged?
Yeah, hold on. Let's rewind for pause. Press pause.
Okay.
So share how, unlike most best friends, hear the gradual story unfold. Tell us how you announced to your best friends of 8 years by that point.
Yeah. Well, and here's the thing. So Joe, he did share with me this prayer. Sorry, the sun is now coming in right in my eyes.
No worries.
He did share with me this prayer, and I prayed about it as well, and felt confirmation from God not to run the other direction, that this is, something to pursue. And so all along, it was like, we're dating to get married eventually. But like I said, he was graduating. I still had a year left of school. It just didn't seem like the timing was going to be right. And so I was looking like long-term relationship. Well, we are in a long-term relationship, but I was
long-term
thinking,
dating.
Right. Yeah. It would be a while until, marriage was on the table. And then he came to my house at Christmas and surprised me. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're here. And then he proposed to me in front of my whole family while we were opening gifts. And so I knew we were, moving towards marriage. I did not expect to be engaged, 2 months after we'd started dating officially.
Yeah, you didn't expect to find Joe under your Christmas tree that Christmas.
No, I did not. And so we, as friends, we would do our annual like Christmas brunch, or, anytime we were all home from school, we would get together.
Yeah.
And everyone was getting together at your house that night.
Yeah.
Right.
And we're
your
sharing
parents.
things like what's happened over the last semester in college and, whatever frustrations we may have been experiencing. And then Ashley walks in with this guy and we're like,
who's this
Sorry, what?
guy?
First of
And then
all,
I'm
when are
like,
we inviting guys to our girls' brunch? And then
yeah,
you're like, oh, and by the way,
it was a shocker, I think, for just about everybody. Anyway,
yeah. Well, we make fun of
so
Ashley for that still because it basically went from, hey, we're single in college to, oh, by the way, I'm getting married.
I'm getting married.
The other takeaway from
Yeah.
this is not only praise specifically, but I'm thinking like, man, you need to really, God, I pray marry somebody as jacked as Chris Hemsworth. Then when you know he's the one.
Right. You know he's the one. That guy is a
Hey,
dead
I know
ringer
you're the
for
one.
Chris
I prayed
Hemsworth.
for you. I actually got pretty close. I can't complain. Yeah. That's hilarious. Well,
Yeah, and I look back on that too, and I think I was 21, almost 22 when we got married. I was such a child. Like, I don't know. Our parents were both like, we had their blessing. They were really supportive. Our friends, once they adjusted to the idea of how quick it was, were supportive. We didn't have
yeah.
anyone being like, this is not a good idea for you guys. This is fast. You're young. And I look back, I'm like, man, God was faithful to, grow us together and not, in our ignorance, a lot of things could have not gone well. So
yeah, no, I
anyway.
agree. When we got to know him, I don't think it did not take any of us long to see that just because it goes fast doesn't mean it's wrong.
Right.
Or just because it's easy doesn't mean it's wrong too. It can go both ways. So you got married and then you moved to Iowa for a period of time. And then you came back to Pennsylvania. How long ago was that? So we're from Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and you came back.
Yeah, it was, it was just a little over 10 years ago because we moved back when I was pregnant with our son, Owen.
Yeah. And then not only did you have two young kids in that time frame, but then you and Joe essentially adopted about a dozen teenage girls. Tell us a little bit about what you do. It's a very unique job title.
We moved back. So spoiler alert, Joe didn't go to medical school. We had moved to Iowa with that intent, and he, a couple months into it, just said, I don't really feel like this is where God wants me to be. And so we were like, okay, we're settled in Iowa. We made friends. We had community. It was a great place for us to establish our first years of marriage. But then we found ourselves, we were spending all of our time giving and serving at church. We loved the students there. We had them to our house all the time. And we found ourselves working jobs that weren't, we were just paying bills basically with the money we were making. And then like spending all the rest of the money on these students to have them over and have parties and things. And so we thought, how can we make a living out of this? And we didn't feel called specifically into ministry, in the traditional sense. But long story short, we came across a ministry that had house parents. And we were like, house parents, that's an interesting idea. So I was pregnant with Owen. We knew we wanted to move back towards family. And so we started looking into this idea of house parenting. And we found the Milton Hershey School, which Joe was like, this is right up the road from where you grew up. And I remembered it vaguely as we would pass through campus going to Hershey Park in the summer. So we were too young at the time to be house parents, but we moved back to Pennsylvania. Joe found work. I stayed home with Owen. And then Myra. And then when we were old enough, we applied to be house parents at Milton Hershey School, and have been here for the last, we're in our 9th school year now. So it's been a while. And basically this is a school for students in poverty. So kids, when it was established, it was for orphan boys, which, that's what the need was at the time in 1909. That's not really so much the need anymore. So there is a income threshold that kids have to meet, but it's essentially a cost-free private boarding school for students in need. So, and then Milton Hershey, the chocolate guy, his vision was for there to be a school and a home for kids. So we work on the home life side of that. So we have a house of 12 high school girls. And we
There are people that
basically
just heard that and like died inside. They're thinking, how is she vertical?
man, it's wonderful. It really is. I can't say enough about how much we love it. Yeah, it's great. It's exhausting. It's rewarding, and yeah, we love it. And we I feel like we just get paid to live, really. We make dinner and help with homework and help keep kids accountable and take them where they need to go. And
Yeah, you guys
sometimes we
have
look
so many stories from, as one can imagine, with a dozen. Do you have any stories that you can share off the top of your head, funny moments or
oh
lessons
gosh.
learned as a house parent?
Well, I don't know if I have any off the top of my head. There's too many, probably. I do know right after we took over the home that we're in, we we were told, like, come in hard. It's easier to like loosen up, but when you come in,
Mm.
like, come in hard and firm. So we like came in, and like the girls they weren't being kind to one another. We like took all their cell phones. And then that, like a day later, we got dumped on with like 3 feet of snow. And so we were trapped in the house for 4 days, and we had like taken all their cell phones. So I just remember being like, oh my gosh, we can't go back on this now. Like we've put our foot down. And anyway, those are such good memories. We get to go on student home vacation, and we took them to upstate New York, and we thought we were going on a 3-mile hike, and it was 3 miles one way. So it was more like 3.5. So it ended up being this like 7-mile hike we were not prepared for. Sometimes the worst moments in the moment end up just being the ones you look back with a lot of fondness. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we laugh all the time because I just think like my 3 kids, I can't fathom adding 12 more on
Yeah,
top of it, let alone teenage girls.
it's funny. You just do it, and then
Yeah.
it is funny to see people's faces when you tell them what you do, and they're like, "Oh,
Are you
a
on
lot."
drugs? Like,
Yeah,
what is
we're a
wrong with
little
you?
crazy. We're a little crazy. Yeah.
Well, I have
Mm.
told you this before, but I have so much respect for what you and Joe do because it's not for everybody, and I'm so grateful for the way that you're able to serve those girls in that way. So you've been a house parent for what, almost 8 years now. And then in 2015, your world kind of turned upside down. Tell us a little bit about the news that you got that year.
Yeah. So when you start house parenting, you're not placed in your own home right away. You're basically like a substitute teacher. And that's what we were doing. So we covered 4 different homes. So every 3 days we would move homes. We worked 12 days straight. So we would be in one home 3 days, one home 3 days, one home 3 days, one home 3 days, and then we would go off. And we had our kids at the time they were 3 and 1. And so we had these 2 small kids. We were moving every 3 days. At the time we had high school boys, and it was exhausting. It really was. So around January, I started getting this pain, and I thought, I'm just sleeping on different beds all the time. It was like in my kind of around my collarbone, but it like radiated to my back. And I just thought, we're just moving around a lot. And so, but it persisted. And so Joe said, why don't you go get a massage? So never say no to that. And that didn't help. So I just kept kind of pushing through it, just explaining it away. I hate going to the doctor, which is funny to say now, in hindsight. And then I also had these like chest pains that kind of were coming along with it. And so I finally went to the doctor and really downplayed everything. Like, so like I shouldn't even be here. I'm fine. I'm having this pain. I don't know. And I have thanked my doctor time and time again for saving my life that day, because she did not brush me off. And she noticed things about my body that I didn't even notice. So she noticed that one of my veins in my neck was really distended, and she decided I needed to have more testing. And so I just remember thinking it's probably cardiovascular, because they did an ultrasound of my neck, and then had an x-ray, and then they did a CT scan. And the whole time I'm thinking this is cardiovascular. I never thought anything beyond that. And then it was April 2nd. It was Myra's birthday. Our daughter was turning 2, that I got a call. I had my CT scan in the morning, and just a couple hours later, I got a call from my primary care physician, and she said, hey, your CT scan showed that your chest is just full of enlarged lymph nodes. And when we see something like that, it's typically lymphoma of some kind. So she said, I need you to come back in. We need to do lab work right away. And then, we'll go from there. And I just remember hanging up the phone and thinking, isn't lymphoma cancer? I can't have cancer. And so Joe wasn't with me at the time, and I waited for him to come back. I told him, briefly what I had heard, and a friend of mine drove me back to the doctor to get lab work. And from there, it took about a month and a half to get a diagnosis. But it was May 15th that I was officially diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma. So lots of scans and tests and biopsies to figure that out, but we got there.
Yeah, I'll never forget when you told us girls, because what a lot of people may not realize is that friend who introduced you and I years earlier had I think it was just the year before, right?
It was, it was like 9 months before.
Yeah, had herself just been diagnosed with breast cancer. And I mean, that was shocking in and of itself, but in some ways it was almost more shocking than to hear from you, because I just remember thinking, what is going on? We were in our 20s, late 20s, and young kids. And I'm thinking, what in the world? Like, 2 of my best friends have cancer. It was just surreal. And as, a nurse practitioner and somebody who, professionally lived around disease for years, it was such a very strange sensation to suddenly have, disease affect my life in such a personal way at so young of an age. So I just remember we were all, in shock. Like, how could this possibly be happening, to another one of us at this age? Tell us a little bit about Hodgkin's lymphoma for those that don't understand the disease. You hear the word cancer, and there's just so many forms, and they're all very different, with different prognosis and even treatment. Tell us a little bit about Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Yeah, if you're going to be diagnosed with cancer, that's the one to get, is what I tell people. And I'm sorry, it's been long enough now. I make a lot of jokes, but
well, that's the way to live through it.
It has been a really helpful survival technique. So lymphoma is a type of blood cancer. It affects your lymphatic system. There are masses that grow within your lymph nodes. Hodgkin's lymphoma is one type, and then there's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Of non-Hodgkin's lymphomas, there's like 60 different subtypes, and Hodgkin's lymphoma is just kind of stands on its own. It's really rare. Of the lymphomas that are diagnosed every year, it only accounts for like 8 to 10%. But it's also, it's one of the few cancers they will say is curable. Other cancers, they'll say you're in long-term remission or things like that, but Hodgkin's, they'll say you're cured. There's no evidence of disease. You're done with this. And so in that sense, the month and a half waiting for a diagnosis was torture, because I didn't know if I had a lymphoma that was going to kill me next week, or if I had a lymphoma that was so slow growing that they wouldn't even treat it. So getting the diagnosis was helpful. We felt like, a 95% survival rate that's pretty good. It's a very straightforward treatment plan. And it was the same treatment plan they've been using for years, with, a 95% survival rate. So it was 12 rounds of chemotherapy. So for 6 months, I went every other week for chemo. Occasionally they'll follow up with radiation, just to, if the area is localized enough that they can avoid damaging other tissue. So it was really easy in the sense that I didn't have to think about treatment. It was just like, this is the treatment that they do, and this is what I did. And so yeah, I felt fortunate with my diagnosis in a lot of ways.
We are going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we will hear more from Ashley. As you have already figured out, her treatment was not straightforward, and we'll talk about that and how she has combated fear and the importance of allowing joy and grief to coexist, and how she has truly thrived, not just survived. And we will talk more about that after the break. You have tried it all. Worried you will never lose the extra weight or reclaim the energy you once enjoyed? Want to achieve fat loss without spending hours in a gym or eliminating entire food groups from your diet? Well, now you can. In the virtual Faster Way to Fat Loss with Anna, my 6-week fitness and nutrition program, you will learn how to pair effective 30-minute workouts with all-natural, evidence-based nutritional strategies to leverage what you eat and when you eat to reset your metabolism and burn fat fast, even that stubborn belly fat. I am a dual certified nurse practitioner passionate about teaching sustainable strategies to promote fat loss and prevent disease. I have cheered on thousands of clients who have done just that with the Faster Way program. In my 6-week program, the average client currently sheds 7 inches of body fat. 93% report more energy, and 89% state that their mental health has improved. 100% of clients report they feel this program is sustainable. Curious to try the program but not sure if the strategies will work for you? Try the Faster Way strategies for free. Head to www.hammersandhugs.com and sign up for my free 7-day fat loss accelerator course today and start your own transformation story. Welcome back. We are here with Ashley Hoover, and we're going to play a quick round of this or that. Speed round. You have 2 options. Don't think about it too hard.
Okay.
And here we go. M&Ms or Skittles?
M&Ms. Peanut.
Ooh, very specific.
Yeah.
Horror or comedy?
Oh, comedy.
Yeah. Toilet paper, crumple or fold?
Crumple.
Oh, she's a crumpler.
We have this debate in our house.
I'm telling you, I really think like households have fallen apart over this debate. It's really,
yeah. It's like the toilet paper over under debate.
yeah,
too.
Another one. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I didn't ask is I'm actually a roller. I don't crumple or fold.
Oh, you roll it.
I live outside the box.
That does not surprise me, Anna. Not one bit.
Convertible or truck?
Is there a neither option? When I was a kid, a Dodge Ram
Big
was my dream
minivan.
car. I don't know why. So I'll say truck, I guess.
Perfect. Sandwiches in triangles or rectangles?
Triangles. It's just more fun.
Yeah, agreed. NFL or college football?
College football.
Kindle or old-fashioned book?
Old-fashioned book. Do you see my
Same
shelf
girl,
behind
same.
me?
It's so color coordinated, by the way.
Yeah.
It's very aesthetically pleasing.
It's just more fun that way.
Oh, makes the color lovers happy. Cat or dog?
Dog.
Bike or rollerblades?
Bike.
Early bird or night owl?
This is a hard one. I think night owl, but I don't love waking up in the morning, but I love the morning.
Yeah.
So, but I naturally am a night owl. And
I feel like it
our
changes
job,
with time too. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like a season.
I'm just naturally up until, 11:30 every night almost. So,
yeah. If it's a girls' weekend, night owl.
right. If we're at the spa together.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah. What she didn't say is there's also an amazing spa up her way as well. Milton Hershey knew what he was doing, man. He probably had no idea what was going to happen.
He made a great little town here.
Yeah, he did. Okay, so we were talking earlier about how Hodgkin's lymphoma, typically, historically speaking, is a treatable form of cancer, which, as you mentioned, is incredibly rare in and of itself, and has a very, very high survival rate. And that was not your story. Has not been your story.
Yeah.
You have gone through stem cell transplant, multiple treatment options, an ongoing clinical trial. How did you handle that initial sense of why me? Not only were you undiagnosed with cancer, but then you have that sense of like, okay, well, it could be worse. At least I have this treatable form. So there's sort of that high. And then you hit another low of, okay, wait a minute. This isn't going to be my story. How do you respond to that? Tell us a little bit about what goes through your mind.
It's definitely been a bit of a roller coaster, but to be honest, I don't feel like I ever had the moment of why me. And that's not something I can attribute to anything except Jesus. I don't know. In my mind, it's just been like, why not me? There's so much suffering that happens. There's so many people who go through so much hardship. So why do I feel like somehow I should be the exception to that? So it never was a why me. And it was very, with each relapse, it was just kind of like a knock down to the ground. And then Joe and I would dust ourselves off and stand up and figure out how to move forward. So we allowed ourselves the space to mourn and to grieve the loss of, what we thought was going to be more normal. And then we just kept going. So I just always have hope is kind of my word. And I've always just felt like, as long as I have breath in my lungs, there is hope. And even when I don't have breath in my lungs, I have the hope of eternity with Jesus. So, I've continued to cling, I think, to that through each time. And that's not to say that it's been rosy and easy. But we've made it through.
What are practical ways? So for somebody who is listening to this, who has either recently received a diagnosis of cancer, maybe they have a loved one or a friend who has recently received a diagnosis, or maybe it's just an ongoing battle for them. What are practical tips that you could give to somebody to help them with the approach that I'm not just going to survive through cancer, I'm going to thrive through cancer? Because you have done that better than really anybody that I know. And what practical advice would you have?
I think for me, like you said, I was 29 when I was diagnosed. So like I hadn't even hit 30 yet. Yeah. And I did a lot of running. So you talk about like the thriving. I hate running so much. I hate it so much.
You were a softball player.
I was a
running
softball player.
Means base to base.
Exactly. I could sprint short distances and I did that well, but I hated running. And I ran. Because there was something about when you see things being taken from you. So I hated running. My friends here would invite me to go running. I didn't want to go running with them. I thought, why would you spend your time doing that? And then I was in the hospital, going through a stem cell transplant. Like I couldn't run if I wanted to. I could barely stand. And so there was something about that was like, dang it, I want to run. Like I want to be able to do those things. And so for me, thriving was almost out of stubbornness. Like, I'm not going to let this get the better of me. Like I'm gonna be who and what I thought I would be in my 30s. And so I was fortunate, and some of I had some really harsh treatment where honestly making it out of bed each day and walking, to the mailbox and back to my bed was a huge win. But other than that, when I was going through treatments that were a little more mild on my body, I tried my hardest to take advantage of that. And really, I guess my advice for somebody to thrive is, no matter what you're trying to do, just in surviving cancer, any difficulty, is surround yourself with community. I had people around me that pushed me to run, and people around me that wouldn't let me, just wither away to nothing or give up hope. So I think so much of thriving has to do with the people you surround yourself with.
Mm-hmm. How have you seen the opportunity to use your story of hardship with the girls that you serve? Because you have so many neat examples of inspiring them to rise up as well, despite their own hardships. Can you give any examples of how you've been able to do that?
Yeah, it's actually, and there's so much about being diagnosed with cancer that was just, and it's typically in hindsight, not right away, but in hindsight has just been such a huge blessing. And some of that is the kids we serve, they come from some really hard stuff, and I couldn't relate. It was like, well, I grew up with a mom and a dad and a brother and sisters, and we were happy, and I had everything I needed, and we didn't want for anything. And I was safe, and I didn't live in a community with a lot of drugs or violence or, so I just had a hard time relating. There's something about going through suffering, no matter what form it comes in, that allows you to relate with anyone else who's suffering somehow. It's like suffering is universal, no matter, how it comes to you. And so it allowed me to really, I think, be, as I was vulnerable with my story and sharing and some of it, when I was in and out of the hospital for treatments, they were watching me. They saw me go from like this to bald, and
Which,
they
let me
watched
just say,
me.
Ashley, even in the midst of her cancer treatments, still had more beautiful hair than I have ever had in my life.
Stop.
It is 100% true. Yeah, you
Uh,
truly have just looked so gorgeous, even in the midst of your cancer treatments.
oh
Anyway.
my word. Anyway, now that I'm blushing, thank you, Anna. Well, I would run with my girls, or we would work out or whatever, and I would say to them, listen, I am 32 years old and I have cancer, and I can do this. You can do this. And so I would just, put it all out there, like, hey, if I'm out here doing this, you can be out here doing this, because you are 16 years old and you are healthy. And I think, I don't know for sure, but I feel like that motivated them, like, oh yeah, I can do this. So every race that I've run, and we've done it alongside our students, and we've trained with them, and so that's been really special, I think.
So you have the teenage girls that you serve as a house mom, and then you have your two biological children.
Yeah.
How through this process, and again, you mentioned when you were first diagnosed, what, Owen was 3 and Myra was 1. Over the years, they're now, 6 years later, they're certainly older, and they've come to understand, your story and your situation. How have you talked to them about sickness, about death, about suffering? And again, what advice do you have for those of us parents? Like you said, suffering is universal, and death is a guarantee for all of us. And sickness is a reality in this world. So how do you talk to your kids about those things in such a personal way? And then what advice do you have for those of us who are also trying to have that conversation with our children for whatever reason?
it was never, it was just the norm for us. So because they were so young, we tried to make it not scary for them. So they would come to the hospital and sit in the hospital bed with me when I was receiving my chemo infusions. And, when I was home and I was sick and I was laying in bed, they would lay in bed with me and they would read me books, or I would read them books, or we'd watch TV together. And when I was in for my stem cell transplant, they would come and they would sit in my bed and they would watch movies, and the nurses would bring them ice cream and pretzels, and they just thought that was the best. And so it was just normal. I think the suffering and the sickness aspect, so much so that I remember Myra, so I drastically changed my diet for a couple years, and we were out to eat, and I had asked a question about one of the, something I was going to order. Does it have, whatever in it? And she looks at the waiter and she goes, "My mom has cancer." And I just remember, as an adult, you understand the weight of the word cancer, and it's very like, it makes people uncomfortable and they don't know how to respond. And so here Joe and I are like comforting this poor waiter, like, it's okay. but I'm fine. And look at me, I'm still alive and it's okay. And Myra is just like, what?
What's wrong with this guy?
Yeah. What's wrong? And so I remember there being this moment of like, realization that cancer is not the common cold. It kills people and people die. And, Heather, our friend, she passed away because of her breast cancer. And I think that was another moment of realization for our kids of like, not only do I know people die, I know someone who died. And so it's just been, it's just kind of been an ongoing conversation. I think it's been something that we talk about and we're honest with them. And every time I go for another PET scan, it's like, maybe there will be cancer again. And this is how we're going to handle that. And we talk a lot about Jesus and how he comforts us in our suffering. And we talk a lot about hope and, the hope of eternity. And so it just, in a lot of ways, again, it's just, I'm fortunate in that it has given us these natural avenues to have those hard conversations with our kids, and to continue having them.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing the most of here is that sense of be willing to have the real and the hard conversations with your kids, certainly in age appropriate ways. But, again, as in a similar scenario, although I don't have cancer, but it was similar watching, especially my oldest daughter, Gracie, who was good friends with Heather's two girls, similar conversation. Suddenly death is very real. And like, oh, my friends lost their mom. And just how those conversations are hard, especially when you're wrestling with the reality yourself. But I do think, and you have mirrored this so well, is there is so much benefit to having those very real, honest conversations with your kids and kind of bringing them along for the journey.
Sorry, they're not conversations anyone wants to have.
Right.
Joe and I, we have had more conversations about me dying than you ever want to have with your spouse after, 14 years of marriage, or really any amount of marriage. But there's something cathartic about just speaking what's true instead of trying to pretend like it's a challenge to remain hopeful and also be honest about what's going on. But it's helpful to like speak the truth and say, this may very well kill me. And that's okay, because I have hope and you have hope and we're going to be okay and you're going to be okay and the kids are going to be okay, and people die all the time. And more than that, like what do we want our story to be, and what will the legacy be,
Yeah.
and how will you move forward, and how will you help the kids move forward? And so yeah, we've just had to have a lot of those conversations that are uncomfortable, and there's a lot of tears, and but in the end, I think we're better for it, so that if
Yeah.
and when that day comes, it doesn't yeah, we
The
feel as
foundation has
prepared,
been laid.
right?
Yeah.
You feel as
Yeah.
prepared for it as you can,
Yeah.
in some ways.
You wrote an incredible blog post. You called it Scanxiety, and you addressed the ongoing emotions of getting yet another scan and waiting once again for another result. The sense of fear and anxiety, which is certainly so prevalent and understandable in cancer, is again a universal human emotion, just like suffering is a reality for all of us to some degree. What practical ways have you battled fear and anxiety so it doesn't become debilitating? What advice do you have from your own experience and to encourage somebody who is just feeling completely crushed by their fear and anxiety?
Yeah, so much of scanxiety, which is, it's like a legit thing. It's a real thing that
I
you talk to
mean, you don't have to
anybody.
convince me. Oh my
I
goodness.
Yeah, I remember reading an article called Scanxiety, and I thought, this, yes, I can relate with this, but that is,
Mm,
it's real. For me, I would say a lot of the fear and anxiety comes from the realization of being totally out of control. So you can eat all the right things, do all the right exercise, take all the right medication, go into a scan, and still they can detect cancer. So that was my story. Well, I think particularly my second relapse, but for both of my relapses, I felt fine. I felt like I had done all the right things, and then they detected cancer. And so there's just this realization of, I am 100% out of control.
mm,
And so finding the balance of trusting God's goodness and his sovereignty in that, has just, I think that is what has given me peace each time. And unfortunately, or fortunately, at this point, I've had enough experience with relapsing and with, hearing a diagnosis, that it's just given me that sense of, well, if this is what we hear again, we've been here before, and
mm.
we're still here, and we'll move forward. So I kind of have that, like, I wear that experience in a way that allows me to go in and feel some type of peace that I imagine you wouldn't feel if it's your first or, second time in a scan. But yeah, it's just that sense of being totally out of control, which
Mm-hmm.
none of us are in control, but we like to feel like we have some sense of control.
Right.
So
Right. Something that you and I have talked a lot about, and we've mentioned it a couple times, but the freedom that comes from finding a place where you are able to allow grief and joy to coexist. And
mm,
this is something that, I have certainly talked a lot about as well, because I do feel that when we can reach that place in life, there is a freedom that comes because you now have this more authentic way of living where you
right.
recognize suffering, you recognize grief. It's real. We don't try to gloss over it. We don't try to make it pretty. It's raw. It hurts. But at the same time, we also can live with joy within the grief. And when we are able to do that, it's truly transformative. And I know you and I have talked about this. How have you seen with cancer that concept transform your life as you learn to allow them to coexist together? How has that transformed you?
Like I said, up until cancer, I hadn't had any experiences in my life that had really brought me that level of sorrow and grief.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was really my first time dealing with this degree of like, oh man, like it brings you down to zero. And I think what I have learned is that sorrow and joy are two sides of the same coin. The reason we experience such joy is because we know such sorrow, because you experience such grief that you can really then also experience so much joy. So much of my grief has been not necessarily over the loss of my life, but over the loss of my life, over the loss of, if I die, I don't get to be a wife to Joe, and I love him so much. And I don't get to be there for my kids to watch them grow up and do all the things. And when I think about that, I'm like, I have so much joy that I have in this life. And that's where the sorrow comes from, is that I don't want to lose those things. And for me, I have just found it doesn't serve anyone to just walk around angry and walk around bitter. And again, I'm out of control. And the one thing I can control is me and what my attitude is going to be towards this whole thing. I remember reading a book a couple years ago by Viktor Frankl. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. And he was an Austrian psychologist who was a Jew and went through, I don't remember which concentration camp he was in, but he lost everything. He lost everything. And he came out, he survived, and he wrote this book about it. And his conclusion is essentially that he watched so many Jewish people who still had joy, because the one thing that could never be taken from them was their ability to choose what their attitude would be. And I thought, that's it. That's it. Is, we still always have the ability to choose what our approach and our attitude is going to be to the suffering that we go through. And joy, again, I feel like is a choice. It's a choice to say, I'm going to be joyful, because the alternative is going to make me more miserable and everyone else around me. And so I'm going to laugh about, the fact that my insides are like a 68-year-old woman because of all the treatment I've been through. I'm going to laugh, in the face of menopause at 36, because I'm not 36 until tomorrow, but I'm going to laugh in the face of this, because
y'all, our lunch conversations are amazing when us girls get together.
That's right. Man, we have some things to talk about.
we good times. Yeah. Well, and I think you have lived that out so well, because conversely, I think it is also, it can be dangerous to put rose-colored glasses on. Some people think joy means you don't talk about hard things. It's like joy is more so this face of happiness, when in reality, I think the deepest joy comes from fully acknowledging the reality that exists, that this is crap. This stinks. And being able to live in that dichotomy, and something that you have just been such an incredible example to all of us. Is so important.
You said an interesting thing about happiness. Working with teenagers, you realize so much of the message that they're being fed is they're pursuing happiness. They just want to be happy. And I try and tell them, that's crap. Happiness is a sham. Happiness is an emotion that you feel. Joy is something much deeper that you choose. So I can be having a really bad day and I can still be joyful. Whereas it's hard to have a really bad day and still feel happy. So I think differentiating between happiness and joy too is different. There have been moments where I don't feel happy, but I still have joy, if that makes sense. So I think, there's a difference between the two.
Absolutely. I love that. There's so many good quotes in there.
Yeah.
My producer catching all of this. I love it. I love it. Oh my gosh. Just so many words of truth. Whew, I knew this was going to come at some point.
Sorry. Your tissues are right behind you.
They are right behind me. One of the things I will never, ever forget about you is you have lived this out in such a way. When our best friend was dying in her last days, Ashley helped me take care of her. And I'll never forget, I have a picture of Ashley blow drying Heather's hair. And it just was such a beautiful example of the way that you have truly chosen to live out your joy. That even despite your own suffering and your own realities that existed. Sorry, this is probably really weird to listen to over a podcast platform. But, I will never, ever forget that moment because it spoke so much to me, this sense that where a lot of people would have wanted to run from that reality, walking so closely in tandem with somebody who is traveling a road so similar to your own in many ways. And, in her final days, I can't imagine what goes through your heart and through your mind, but instead of avoiding it and skipping the struggle, you jumped right in and served her in her last days. Do you want to speak at all to that? What was that like for you?
Yeah, I do. First of all, I am so thankful you took that picture because I will treasure that one forever. And it really was my joy to be able to serve Heather in those last days. But the interesting thing was, I said early on in my treatment, it was very black and white. It was like, this is the treatment you do. At that point, I was at a point in my treatment where I had another setback. I still had active disease. I was waiting to resolve. I was on steroids to resolve another issue that was caused by the treatment I was on at the time. And feeling like I'm out of options. I felt, honestly, I was out of options. And I was going to see a new doctor, and there was a potential for a clinical trial, but I didn't know. And I didn't know what it would entail. And here I am watching Heather, and she made a lot of choices in her treatment that kind of led her to where she was. And I knew, here I am trying to make choices in my treatment that could lead me, no matter what choice I made, I felt like this is where I was going to end up as well. So our journeys had just mirrored each other so much from, you mentioned she was diagnosed just shortly before I was the first time. And then she relapsed twice. I relapsed twice. And so I just felt like as I was serving her, I was watching this near future version of myself. And so in some ways, there was a lot of comfort for me in that, because I think Heather, her middle name is Joy, and that's how she lived out her final days too. And she was in so much pain, and she just continued to think about other people still. So for me, I think it was in one way really comforting to know that, you know what, I can be at the end of my life. And I watched her kids and I thought, they're going to be okay. And I'll be okay. We'll all be okay through this. So, but yeah, it was difficult in a lot of ways, to leave there in the evening and just think, yeah, this could be what my life looks like in just a little bit. So
well, I'll never forget just that picture I will always remember. And I know how much she appreciates. She just couldn't get over you serving her in that way. She mentioned it so many times.
Oh.
So one of your last blog posts was about Hawaii. Who doesn't want
Yes.
to talk about Hawaii? It's
Let's
like 30 degrees out right now. Let's talk about Hawaii. I feel warmer already. But I just want to share a little bit about what you wrote here. You said, the thing about hope is it is stubborn. It is buoyed by optimism and fueled by faith. What I want you to know is a byproduct of hope is gratitude. We got to go to Hawaii for 3 weeks, and I didn't think I would make it to Hawaii. The hope of the trip is what magnified the beauty of a place that already defines the word. Grateful does not even begin to describe our sentiment after this experience. Oh, and P.S., PET scan number 17 shows complete metabolic response still, and grateful does not begin to describe my feelings about that either. So you are still showing complete metabolic response as of the last
one.
Yeah, as of the last one, thanks to a clinical trial that you're currently in.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I go in December my next one will be in December, which I know, when we're recording this, will be PET scan number 18. And then my clinical trial is done beginning of 2022. So the future in a lot of ways still feels like a question mark. And, I talked about control, but there is the sense of still not being in control of what happens in the future. And I'm just learning to rest in that, and rest in today and what today brings. And, I think God gives us exactly what we need for each day. And that has proved true time and time again. So, anyway, but yes, so celebrating today, complete metabolic response.
Gratitude does not begin to describe my feelings either.
No.
I am so grateful. So grateful. Yeah. If people want to be able to follow your journey, tell them a little bit about your website. That's where you blog and share. You are an excellent writer. I know many people have told you need to write a book. I want you to write a book.
Some in my lifetime, I hope to write a book. That's my lofty goal. In all my spare time.
Really.
Yeah. So I started the blog in 2015 as I just didn't know how to keep everyone up to date on what was happening.
Right.
So it was more for information's sake. So this is what I'm going through. This is what we need. And that way I could put it out to everybody, because we have family and friends kind of scattered all around. And what I found was, as I'm writing these updates, it became like a way for me to process what I was learning, what God was teaching me, what I was going through. And so it's almost like a very public journal in a way. That original blog went through 2018. And then anyway, the domain went down. It's a long story. I was able to recover most of the blog posts, but and then I started a new one in 2019. It's called choosinghope.blog. And so I mostly just write when there is an update or when there is something that has happened. So I honestly don't write a whole lot. But I have a feeling I will start writing more in the future as, the trial comes to a close and have to figure out what's next. So, but yeah, that's where choosinghope.blog. And that's just kind of the story of how I started keeping a blog and writing in the first place.
It's really choosinghope.blog, and we'll make sure that link is on the blog post for the show notes for this episode. And we'll also include the picture of Ashley and Heather because it's precious. But it's such a great read, though, for anybody who is going through cancer, who has a loved one going through cancer, or just if you are suffering, struggling, to just scroll back through the old posts. Again, Ashley she's witty. She's honest. And I just think there is truly so much hope to be found in your experience and the way you've communicated it. So I highly recommend that people go through and read it, and we'll anxiously await for your book to come out. I just want to end with this. In the New Testament, 2 Corinthians 6:10 says that we live as sorrowful, yet always rejoicing, poor, yet making many rich, having nothing, and yet possessing everything. And speaking as a friend of the last 20 years, those of us that have walked this journey with you have been made rich by your example and the way that you've faced great sorrow, and yet you authentically live with joy. And I will treasure this interview. It's an honor to have you. I love you.
Praise God. Love you too. Thank you.
I'll stop
so
talking
much.
right now. Love you, girl.
Love you too.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of the Imperfectly Empowered podcast. It is my honor to be here with you. I am so grateful for each and every one of you. If you are watching on YouTube, be sure to click the subscribe button below so you don't miss a show, and leave a comment with your thoughts from today's episode below. If you are listening via your preferred podcasting platform, would you help keep us on the air by rating our show and leaving an honest review of your thoughts from today? In case you haven't heard it lately, your story matters and you are loved. This is your host, Ahnafulmer, and I will see you here next time on the Imperfectly Empowered podcast.